started. Borderline. I'm sure there might be a few others coming in.
This actually is it.
This is it? Okay.
Yeah, we have 4 that are traveling today.
You truly are a punctual group, so thank you for being here right on the schedule. I'll go through a couple housekeeping items. So we appreciate the opportunity to get together with OSAC and all of our committees and commissions each year over a kind of a work session dinner, just to kind of compare notes and get input from you. So thank you for this opportunity tonight. We've got an agenda list of things here that we'll go through, and I'll kind of let Ryan lead that. We have an advisory committee interview at 6:50, and we'll need to turn the room before that, so let's plan on breaking at 6:35, 6:40 at the latest, so we can move the tables to the back and get the chairs set up for the regular meeting. We'll have the advisory committee at 6:50, and then regular meeting at 7. So I think most of us know each other, but just for the sake of anybody who doesn't, Clint Folsom, Mayor, go around the room.
Ken Lish, trustee, former OSAC member.
Mark Lasis, Mayor Pro Tem, former OSAC liaison.
Peter Ruprecht, current OSAC member.
Vanessa Hetzel, current OSAC member.
Sean Samuelson, longtime OSAC member.
Kate Senecal, vice chair.
Ryan Welch, chair.
Sandy Amerly, current OSAC liaison.
Matt Bagley, town manager.
Laura Skwadzinski, trustee.
Neil Shaw, trustee.
All right, very good. Thanks, everyone. All right, Ryan, we'll let you take over.
Yeah, sure. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring these up. The first one we had on our list was about the CenturyLink acquisition. When we put the list together, this was before all the other pieces that have transpired with the interaction around this. So I don't know if there's much to discuss here or if it's even appropriate to discuss here. I guess the biggest thing we wanted to say is just thank you guys for making this a priority this year. I mean, we feel like our job has been done well if that's one of your, I think it was top 3 for the year. So having that as, our primary charter, one of yours, that's great. And we feel like we've made that clear that, I guess the fact that you are pushing it has made it clear that it's a priority. So we appreciate that. We're obviously eager to help however we can, but we also know that these things need to be handled the way that the town needs to negotiate this. So I guess what I'll say is we plan to just sit back and help however we can and not be pushing anything or really discussing much, because I don't think we probably should. Okay. So if you feel that's wrong, please correct us, but
I think that's exactly what we would say needs to be done at this point. Where we are at this point is trying to get a meeting set with their executives, their real estate broker, and the Trust for Public Land. And then I think from there, that will give us a sense of kind of what direction it's going to go, and if and when we need kind of the public engagement side of things to occur, then that's certainly where we would like to have more involvement. But let's see where this goes. But it's great to have you all get the Trust for Public Land people involved, and I think that kind of takes it up another level and really I think will help get it done.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty interesting story how that all came about, because we send one member to the COSA conference every year, and it was 2 years ago that Tracy went, and she saw a presentation on how these organizations were working with governments and pulling in all these other pieces and being creative about how to do these acquisitions. She's like, and the guy happens to live in Louisville that she talked to there. So it was just an opportune thing, but it's great that we get the opportunity to go to those,
Yes.
To pick out these little pieces. So.
And we should keep going. We should keep sending somebody every year, because you never know when an opportunity is going to present itself. Matt, we haven't received any response to the letter right now. Or is there anything that we can kind of update anybody on, or do we need to just be hush-hush about it?
No, I don't have
Justin Spring and I had a conversation last week. He talked to Doug Bakke, who's the main broker for CenturyLink on their land transactions and for this site here in Superior. And they're continuing to try to get I think it's the vice president of real estate in on the meeting as well. So they're continuing to work to get a meeting set up, but nothing's been set up at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. You know, we thought there would be more to discuss, but that's moving along so well. I don't think we need to sit on this one anymore. The next one was a fallout from last year when all the conversation was coming around Town 15. And I'm sure that's all fairly fresh for you all. But where we, our perspective was, how can we, we wanted to make sure we would be involved in whatever discussion went on with that property. One thing that we started having discussions within our committee was, should we be making a proposal of what we think the property should be, or should we be maybe working with ProStack or other committees to come up with some sort of joint recommendation? I think the thing for us is this something that you'll even be looking at this year with all the other, I mean, I know your agenda looks fairly full with a lot of other development plans coming forward. Is this even something on your radar this year? Is this something we should focus on this year? Or is it something that we can keep in the back of our mind, but maybe push out to another year?
Yeah. I'll speak for myself, and then I'll let the board members, I imagine everybody's got a little bit different take on it. I personally do not feel a hurry to set a plan of action for it. I think, as you mentioned, we've got a lot of other things on our agenda. I want to make sure we maintain good focus on those. And so for me, not as much of a priority. I'll just let other board members kind of weigh in.
Am I remembering correctly that we have money budgeted for outreach this year for the Town 15, or did we re-budget that?
That was an item that was proposed, but it was taken out.
Okay. I feel similarly to Clint. I think waiting for a catalyst there's no hurry. I think once we see once all the new residents are in, it'll be more clear what we need. That might help drive the conversation, but I don't see a need to rush on a decision.
Yeah, as I recall, when we were going through the budgeting process, I forget how much we were originally proposing, but the discussion was, well, are we just, spending money on, getting input before we've even had a discussion amongst ourselves on the board about, what we possibly would want? And we've never had that conversation. And it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Like, do we want to have the outreach first and then have a discussion on the board? Do we want to have the discussion on the board first and then have the outreach to the community? And what's appropriate? I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong way, but it didn't seem like it was, I guess, the appropriate decision at that point to budget for it. Personally, I don't know what I want to see that property. I feel like undeveloped land in Superior is rare and valuable, and as a general policy, I like to see as much undeveloped land stay undeveloped as possible. I would like to hear from OSAC. I'd like to hear from ProStack about needs for other recreation type amenities, like if we needed ball fields and things like that, parks. But right now, I think it's not a top priority to, at least for me, to figure out what we need to do with that parcel. I think I'm perfectly happy that it is undeveloped right now and can stay undeveloped for the foreseeable future. I don't want anybody in the community getting the wrong impression about what it is and what it's going to be. Like happened last year, that all of a sudden people thought it was going to be a charter school and a community center for profit. So if and when we actually get to the point where we're actually talking about a use of the land, we definitely need to be strategic and careful about giving the community the right impression direction, but I'm open to any good ideas, and I'm also open to it staying, the status quo.
I have a slightly different take. I think especially with last year's proposal to put a charter school on, it became clear to me, I'd like to see some sort of vision around it, even if that's not something we're going to realize for a number of years. I think it's great to have a baseline plan. That said, I wouldn't want OSAC to necessarily spend a ton of resources figuring out what that is, because knowing that we might not implement it for several years, obviously it would change. But I would love to see some sort of high-level vision of what OSAC would want on it, what ProStack would, working together, et cetera. I just would caution you to not necessarily put too much effort into something that would change over the years.
Well, that already exists, right?
Well, we put out a position paper.
Yeah.
We just said this is what we envisioned for it. The other piece was, though, if there was going to be more calls for what could it be, would it be more beneficial if ProStack and OSAC work together and maybe could come up with a joint proposal rather than them being separate? And so what I think we can do here is that we can at least start the discussion with ProStack. We have a yearly leadership meeting with them, and I can talk to their chair, we can talk to their chair and just see what ideas we can start kicking around and see where it goes. I think that seems appropriate based on what I'm hearing here.
I think that would be fantastic. There doesn't need to be a final decision made, but it would be great just to get an idea of the possibilities. And that also gives neighbors some idea of what they might expect in the future. Versus I think it's tricky if one neighbor thinks it's going to be open space and another neighbor thinks it's going to be playing fields, then later down the road that causes the conflict.
I think it never hurts to have the dialogue, and I think it also is good to kind of combine the dialogue between the two committees. I would just caution, let's be careful of what we're communicating, because when people start thinking that things are getting programmed and going down a certain path, that may excite some, it may really concern others, and so let's be aware that or just make it clear the board is not maybe set off any course, but other than to discuss it.
That's a fair point. Understood.
If I could just add, the one thing, I think your OSAC and ProStack on something like this can absolutely work together. I know ProStack's long-range plan document is really dated. I think we've all got to reevaluate what the town needs top to bottom. In my head, it's pools, parks, and pickleball seems to be like the top of the list for everybody. But what just Clint just said, the the board hasn't decided what it wants to do. We don't want the committees off running, and getting too far astray. And if nothing else, maybe as part of the budgeting process, we bring it back and start thinking about what is that long-range ideas, things that ProStack and OSAC have identified in terms of, a list of things that we could do. And then we pull it back into the budgeting process as part of that outreach in terms of like, here's 5 things that the committees have come up with that may work for the space. Do we start engaging the community in 2020 and sort of gauge the interest? Because there is no impetus in my mind to do it tomorrow. It's stable, as Mark said, it's great as open space. If that's the desire for the community long-term, great. But, I don't want to jumpstart the process just because we feel, anxious about it. Because I think we all feel anxious about any open space, that if we don't do something soon, it's going to disappear. And I think we want to maintain the relationship as much as we can.
Well, this just goes to show that it was a really good idea of the previous board, whatever it was, 2012, 2014? 14, in purchasing this.
Yeah.
Because now we've got this really valuable asset, and we've got this interesting problem on our hands of what should we do with this valuable asset. But the only reason that we're really having this conversation about, like, what do we want to see happen to this parcel is because of what happened last year. We weren't really talking about, we need to come up with a use for the town 15 until we got an unsolicited offer to purchase it. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right way to go about doing strategic planning. We should be doing it on our terms when the time is right. And if right now the time's not right and we're okay just hanging on to it, let's just hang on to it. But if it becomes a more compelling need and we decide that, okay, maybe we should do some planning around it, then let's do some planning. Let's just not be led into that planning process by some external force rather than, what we actually want to do.
I guess as the one person who has been the liaison to both committees, I see the value and the great ideas that both committees have had for that piece of property. And I sit there and go, oh my God, they're both great ideas. I don't know what to do with them. And so from my perspective, I would really love to see you guys put your heads together with ProStack and see if you might come up with a vision where you could achieve things that the two of you think are right for the community. I mean, I absolutely love the idea of preserving the wildlife corridor. But I also know there's other places where we need, pickleball courts and things like that. Obviously, a pickleball court next to a wildlife corridor, there might be an issue there. But, you guys are our experts. You're the people who advise us. And so I would, I'm with Laura. I would love to see you play with some ideas for us. And this is just your all's vision. We don't want to go out and hire a consultant, but start getting us excited about what we might be able to do there. When we got hit last year with, we're going to do this on there, we had no vision for that piece of land. And so at least if we have some sort of vision, it gives us something as a community to think about, that if that happens again, in the back of my head, I'm going, no way, because I've seen a vision that a group of experts for our town know about. So, obviously we are not spending any money, but if you guys can have some fun working on this, I would personally love to see you start playing with some ideas.
I completely agree with that. I think if we have something, then any other thing that comes forward, we can use our vision as a yardstick for it. I didn't personally find last year's vision particularly compelling, but if it were something that was really interesting, I would want something to benchmark it against, versus, to Mark's point, I wouldn't want to have to kick off an entire vision and planning process now that we have an offer that seems like it might be a good one.
Okay. Well, can I just ask a question? Is this something that OSAC wants to spend time on? Like, we don't want you to spend time doing something that you guys don't want to do because you're just getting directed to do it from the board. Would you like to brainstorm about ideas? Because I don't have any objection to our advisory committees, in the abstract, brainstorming about ideas and then presenting it as...
The reason we really brought it up was the urgency piece, right? Now that we know that this is not something that's coming forward really anytime soon, at least from your all's agenda, then that helps us decide when we would put time into it. I think the right thing for us to do is just, when we have our meeting with ProStack, just bring it up, see where they're at with this, where their heads are, and start kicking off ideas, and then see where it goes from there. We have a pretty busy work plan, right? So we're not, we wouldn't have a ton of cycles this year to really dig in, and, I don't know, you guys correct me if I'm wrong.
So on our work plan, we do have something in the ongoing section that does state something about potentially updating our position for Town 15. I think that was pretty much it, depending on the scenario, right, that we ran into this year, depending on how things went with our board dinner meeting and whatnot. So personally, yes, I would like to put a lot of energy into that, but that's just me speaking as an individual because I feel strongly about it.
Others?
I agree. I would love to put energy into that, and I think we talked about it a little bit when we did the position paper, so we threw some ideas around at that time, but it's been a long time. We have new members on our committee, and I think it'd be great to work with ProStack on that and see where we mutually agree their ideas are.
So I think as a committee, we can probably put some things together in the background and work together and see what we can come up with within a certain period of time, maybe this year. It's not set in stone, in my opinion, but like you said, I'd like to move forward on it sooner than later because I like being proactive.
So as you know, there's budget this year. We're going to be building a new trailhead right as McCaslin sort of rolls over a little bit up on the top. Thinking about it, it's going to really be a stunning place to just take photos in our town. I was thinking about that the other day. I think someone asked on social media, where would you go to take pictures in Superior?
That was me.
That was Vanessa. But it'll be amazing, right? Right when you're up on the top of that bluff, looking off into the Flatirons and looking off into Longs Peak, it's going to be really cool. So we're excited. Thank you for helping us get that going. We would like to augment that. Right now, we have a very basic plan. It's a sidewalk, a trail, a parking lot, and a gate going into the current trail system. We had other ideas on how we would want to make it, it'll be a good trailhead. We'd like to make it great somehow. I'm not saying that right, but we'd like to augment it with maybe shelters or benches, or we've got some feedback from CAPS on some interesting, I guess you could call it artwork. It actually was pretty clever what they came up with. So we're working, this isn't our work plan, we're working on what we're calling the Shanshan augmentation. We're not trying to call it a phase or anything, but the question here really becomes we're obviously going to be asking for money to do this. And the discussion comes around, is this appropriate open space fund to ask out of that, or would it be something that we would request from the board to be from more of a general fund for the kind of things we'd be asking for? I just don't know what's appropriate there and what isn't.
Matt, do you have thoughts on that, Matt?
What did we budget?
100.
100?
100, which will get us basically the working lot.
And how many spots do we have in the
Let's see,
parking
we're
lot?
27 or 28.
Which it has to be comparable to the Colton Trailhead, I would think. Open space fund. This seems like a open space fund project.
Okay.
Would all of the art come out of that as well? Or would that come out of CAP's budget?
What is CAPS proposing? What, you guys give us a description?
The idea, the one I saw, and I know I missed a few, but it was to put up almost like a picture frame. So back where you would be taking a picture, it would have a frame around it and say Town of Superior, and you would stand behind it and you would take your photos behind it. It looked like a postcard. They showed some examples from some other towns that had done this, and it actually looked really cool.
Yeah, so CAPS had they suggested a blank picture frame installed near the trailhead entrance, gateway to Boulder Valley type thing, or an archway with that same thing. Then also bird identification signs. So those were their three.
The identification signs were like of the mountains, like little placards saying, what are you looking at, that kind of stuff.
That was actually someone else's, but bird identifications was there specifically. I mean, there's historical signs we can put up that if there were a historical commission budget, we might ask if that could come out of that. If there's budgeting room from CAPS that we could potentially pull their ideas from, we'd love to utilize that. It's up to the board and them and whoever else. That's out of our control. But we were hoping that there might be alternative areas that we might be able to pull some of this from than just open space, considering what we really want to try and save it for, the big land purchases.
Is the 100,000 budgeted to come out of the open space fund?
The other items that have been mentioned, the art and
Interpretive signs?
yeah, those would more than likely, I would say, come out of the general fund CIP rather than open space. And we'd have to take a look to see what projects might get delayed this year that we could maybe pull funds from.
And so, just to clarify though, I mean, we know that we're building this year. This would be a separate request that we would come to you, not necessarily with this one. That's why we're calling it the augmentation.
Gotcha.
We started calling it phase 2, but I don't know if you want to call it phases of things because, it may not ever get done. We would like it to get done because we think we can make that a pretty unique and interesting amenity. So that's why we're bringing it up.
Is there, maybe Patrick, Patrick or Matt, you guys know, are there economies of scale if we do try to front load this at the same time as construction? Or do we save just deconstruction costs, or if we have to install stuff later?
I think the items that we were able to look at with Sean were kind of more general fund items. I don't think that they were big construction items. Timing wise, we're actually going to kick the construction out per OSAC's request due to some of the bird migration. So we'll likely kind of put that out towards the end of this year and build after the summer.
Might be some aspects, though, that would make sense to include as part of the project, like if there's a major shelter there, or, those larger pieces.
I did reach out to some of this because there's an easement from Boulder County over the top of the property. Certain types of changes would have to go back to the county and potentially be adopted through the management plan. And that we've seen can take 6 months to over a year. So we've reached out just preemptively to let them know that there may be some changes.
Is there a restroom facility?
Not yet.
No?
So Patrick, the magnitude of changes, shelter, bathroom, those are the type of changes that we have to go back?
And how much are we looking at in terms of what the additional ask would be?
So we don't know that. We have actually just compiled 35 suggestions across the board. We haven't even discussed it as a committee yet. We've gotten suggestions from not only our committee, not even fully our committee, but SYLC, ACES, and CAPS. We're still waiting. I think it's on the ProStack agenda coming up. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yep.
Okay. And as well as I reached out to the Historical Commission because we asked them to come up with the naming for the trailhead, as well as the other suggestions they might have for architecture or signage or whatnot. So we're still a ways off from going back to the board with recommendations, suggestions, how it would play out in terms of priorities and budgeting and all that. We're still a ways out. But.
Has there been any kind of move to bring the groups together in one room at the same time? I know both the Historical Commission and CAPS expressed concerns with Historical saying, well, we'd love to know what the art and what the design is planned in order to come up with a name, and on the flip side, CAP saying we'd love to know the name in order to come up with the art and design. So it seems like it would be great for everyone to get together and be able to discuss that collaboratively.
It would be, yes. Because this was not an official ask on anyone's work planning, except for the Historical Commission, courtesy of Ken asking for it. It might make that difficult unless they were given special permission to collaborate, or if we could pull a meeting together with the interested parties to come up with those types of things. My plan was to eventually put out some kind of slide deck with everything that's been suggested to all the committees so that they could see what everyone said and what the ideas were, and then kind of go from there as time went on with updates on what's going on.
I mean, in lieu of having an actual meeting, which I get might be challenging, I think that could be really neat to have an online collaboration between the committees. I know CAPS makes heavy use of Dropbox and the ability to have multiple people edit a document. So that could be neat if each committee put in some ideas and then you were able to see what are the similarities. Everyone's proposing this sort of theme, so maybe that's the way to go.
Is it possible to do that in a way that meets the open meeting requirements?
So my understanding is that the town Dropbox does meet the open meeting requirements. Is that accurate? Because I know CAPS uses it heavily, so that was my understanding was that was approved.
Just to access information?
To basically everyone edits a document, and that way it's not necessarily all simultaneous, but it's every
Right, because it's being accessed individually. I don't think there's an issue there, but.
And it's eventually presented in a public forum, right? So it does come full circle.
So, one of the things about this trailhead is that if it's done right, and with the access off of McCaslin and the parking lot, it's going to alleviate some of the access that's currently had through Original Town right now. Mm-hmm. Right? At least that's one of the hopes, right? And you've got a lot of mountain bikers that are accessing, parking their cars in Original Town, and a lot of the neighbors there aren't thrilled about that. And I think the Colton Trailhead is like one of the gems of this town, right? It's such an awesome access point to get to the open space that just generally speaking, it's rare for us to build the trailhead into the open space. It's one of, I like the idea of, the gateway to Boulder County, and I like the idea that, CAPS had about the art there. I think we should do this right and spend what we need to spend. I'm not, saying that we need to be frivolous in the way we're spending things, but we should probably have facilities there, right? For people to use, because otherwise it's, there's going to be people getting off the trailhead and don't find their own facilities. I think a shelter probably makes sense as well. And so personally, I think we should do what we need to do to make it right, and it doesn't necessarily need to happen at the same time. Like if Boulder County is a hold up, and we can go forward now and get the parking lot in, get the trailhead constructed, great. And then if we can improve it shortly thereafter, once we have BOCO's approval. But personally, I want to make sure that our trail access is as good as it can be. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why people think that this is such a great place to live, because of our trails and access to open space.
From a timing perspective, it might make sense if you guys could work on this for the next quarter or so, and then come back with like a small, medium, and large plan, saying this is, if we could have the cream of the crop, this is what it is, but if we're just bare bones, augmenting what we can, and then somewhere in the middle, come back, present to us. That way we can have an idea and kind of set a budget goal for next year. That way we can get it included in the budget. And then once we have that and have direction of generally what we want to go forward with, then we can get in front of Boulder County and get, that seems kind of logistically the best way.
I like that idea.
Forward.
Okay. Anything else?
Does this sound good to you all?
Yeah, as we were just wondering about if there would be funding, if you guys would support funding. So it sounds like you are. So that's awesome. That sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, man, we're hauling through these. We were told we'd be lucky to get to number 4, and here we are. So this one is so basically we've been advocating for the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir. We know that there's potential development that could impact that reservoir. We have been focusing solely on what can we do when we look at this reservoir, what recommendations can we make that will help to maintain that habitat, help to maintain the investment that the town made in rehabilitating that, was it 3 or 4 years ago? Does anyone remember the history? But it was several years ago. So we've had Boulder County out, we've had a couple of ecological studies done on the property. We're, at our next meeting, we'll be ready to make a recommendation on how we think the considerations that should be, or what should be considered to help preserve the reservoir, while understanding that we're focusing on the reservoir and not anything specifically that might be happening next to it. What would be, is it appropriate to come forward with a recommendation with that narrow focus of preserving the reservoir, or are we treading into area maybe that we shouldn't be?
I think it's valuable when we get to the point that we're looking at as an area's application or gets to the board. Knowing that would be useful for context, whether that has to come simultaneously or not.
Well, there's only so much we can control because the reservoir is under the control of Boulder County.
Mm-hmm.
So recommendations from the committee we can forward on to the county commissioners and their staff to consider as well.
These would be mostly around how large of a buffer zone and a fence and lighting and wastewater, those kind of things.
On the Zaharis property?
Yeah, on this development on this Zaharis property.
I think personally, I know we had this conversation like about a year ago about, when does the quasi-judicial process start, and to what extent are advisory committees subject to the same constraints that we're subject to. And I know where I landed, and I think where we all landed was that advisory committees are not, they're just advisory, you're advisory committees, you're not making any decisions. So you can do things that we can't, right? So that if there's an application that's pending, you can consider the impacts that it's going to have to open space, to the natural environment and make recommendations. And that kind of dovetails into point number 6 in terms of like input on pending development applications. And we have the ability to refer things to you, to ask specifically for input. But I think on that specific parcel, since we know that there's an application that's going to come at some point, I don't know, has it been submitted or not? Cesareans?
Yeah.
It is? Okay. So there's an application pending. So yeah, I think the time is now for you guys to weigh in with any sort of opinions about what buffer space we need between the reservoir and any development, and just to alert us to the things that we need to be alerted to, right? The nesting birds and things of that nature to, I think, consider when the application comes, because otherwise we're not going to have that information, right? We're just going to have a land use application that we're going to need to consider, and we won't have the benefit of that analysis.
So are you suggesting that we get a recommendation from them now, and then also when an application does come forward, I mean, Matt has the discretion to have the committees look at it, have them also look at the application and provide us specific feedback to the application, or to hold off and wait so they can incorporate whatever they have into the specific application?
I think, and I haven't thought about this until now, but I mean, I think it probably makes sense to do it first without being influenced by the application, and just, this is what we think would be appropriate to, protect the environment and the sensitive, ecological area that we're dealing with. And then once the application gets submitted to the point where it can get referred to OSAC, then do an addendum to your initial opinion and say, okay, this is what we originally thought was going to be necessary. This is what's planned. It either meets our recommendation or it doesn't, or now it's raised some new areas of concern to opine on. I think that would be best. I think reasoning and information that we can get personally, but I'm just speaking for myself.
I kind of thought the same way. Like, I mean, Peter took me out there. It was like minus 15. Felt like I mean, there's aspects of that reservoir that I wasn't aware of in terms of what is the appropriate amount of buffer and what is the best way to maintain it. Obviously, the street right next to it doesn't help, but in a perfect view, what would the group think, what would the committee think is the best way to kind of protect it? Give that to us now, but then whenever it is that an application comes through, I think it's item 6 on the agenda in terms of how do the committees weigh in on these land use applications. And I think when they do come in, that's the right time to kind of go back to sort of here's what we think would have been the best thing in a perfect world. However, here's how we augment that with this land use application, and here's how the town can kind of try to make the two of them merge together. A lot, like what Mark just said. In a perfect world, and the board can kind of look at these pieces of information simultaneously and see are we getting as close to this as possible, or what compromises are we choosing to make?
Is the thought process to use those reports, the recently generated reports, as kind of your framework for your recommendations?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we brought it, but it's a long, it's a 2-pager here, it's a lot, but it's kind of our start of it. I don't know if it's appropriate to pass these out, or we'll wait until we make the recommendation, but each one of these is referencing those different reports, and that's how we are trying to do it, is taking the experts who've looked at it. We sit on an open space committee, but we're not biologists. At least I don't know if any of you are. I'm not a biologist that can professionally say. So we're trying to just pull the best information we have from that, also from a vocal arm of our community that wants to see that protected, some things that they've told us, and just want to come to you with what we think the best way to preserve the reservoir would be. The main question becomes, we obviously don't want to submit this as a recommendation. It's going to be a fairly beefy recommendation. I mean, how do we do that? Do we just write it up as we would, so it's a page long as a recommendation, and that's okay? Or is there some other way that we should be submitting this for your consideration?
I think your position paper was a pretty good format for the Town 15. You could do something like that, and then just add it as an attachment to the meeting minutes and say, recommend to approve the attached
I'm not that particular around format. Whatever is the easiest for you guys to get your ideas out there, I think is fine by us.
Personally, I think less is more. Be concise. We've got a shoreline here, and the shoreline needs a minimum of 15 feet, and we wade through a lot of paper, and the more paper that we have, the easier it is for things to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
So, I think you guys are smart and deliberative and careful in terms of what you're planning on. So, really, I want more of an executive summary on what it is, because a developer's going to not want to see like a 20-page document about all the things that they need to be aware of. They're going to want to know, like, okay, what do I specifically need to do to change my current plans, and can I make that work to respect the recommendations of OSAC?
Okay. So we have a very good start to this. We will be refining this probably in our next, or not probably, it's on our agenda for the next meeting. So we'll be coming forward with a recommendation on this after that meeting. So I don't think there's a board meeting. This is the last one in March, so we can see it at the one after that. So that's our goal, to have it by then. So anything from the group?
No, it's just everything will be substantiated. We'll give our reason, and here's why.
I would say write it, try to write it to two audiences, to us, but also to the developer, because I think in an ideal world, we get something that is, something that we could just refer to the developer, and then Matt can get it into the hands of the developer, and then that's probably the most efficient way of dealing with it.
Just one additional point to make, which kind of follows off what Manager Magley had mentioned, is that there's kind of two entities there: the reservoir, which is managed by the county, and then potentially the development on the Zaharias property. And those are kind of different, and a lot of the reports that we've gotten treat it all as one big thing. And so it's important for us and for everybody else to just kind of keep in mind that we can't really tell Boulder County what to do with their area, and it might not be appropriate for them to tell us. So those kind of have to be sensitively handled together.
I don't think Boulder County has a problem telling people what to do.
So maybe what I should say is they can tell us what to do, and we have to be listening to it and however we want to, right?
Okay. Good. So the fifth one was a little bit a looser of a discussion, but I think we just wanted to get updates on the various, and maybe, Sean, do you remember exactly what we wrote on this one? I think this was where we wanted for the development around downtown, Coal Creek Restoration, Roger Farm development, and downtown trail connectivity. This one is a little bit looser.
Yeah, so from an open space committee standpoint, we're trying to figure out from a larger picture how all these things tie together. How can we get the people downtown using the trails over to the new trailhead and just kind of interweaving everything, through underpasses or overpasses or whatever. And in that kind of vision, I guess we're trying to tie everything together at this point. We're trying to figure out if we can get access from that side of McCaslin over this side for trails, either with a bridge across the creek, going through the underpass over to the Shan Shan trailhead to get over to, up and over to the open space. It's just a matter of the bigger vision of how it all ties together, starting with downtown, getting people to use all areas of everything we're developing in this area. So I guess that's kind of where this one stemmed from. And then kind of making sure that everyone's on the same page with the bigger vision of tying everything together and making sure that people feel safe using the trails. That roundabout is daunting to a lot of people to have to cross to get over the other side. And so using, for instance, the underpass underneath the bridge and then getting over the creek somehow without having to go up onto McCaslin was one of the things. As well as, questions about, is there going to be a problem with flooding along the creek in future years and how that's going to impact trails and whatnot. So.
There is one update since we put this agenda item together, and that was that Trustee Lish had added to our work plan to have a joint meeting with ProStack and the developer of RC, or of downtown, to start figuring out the trail connectivity now. Even if we can put in temporary access short-term before the long-term access is all built out. So that is something I know that town staff is helping to coordinate and get that going. So that's a big step to this. I guess the other question around this for me is that we're actively reviewing and re-ranking the open space. And we presented it last year. We had done it the year before. We feel like we should be doing this almost yearly because it's changing pretty fast right now. And on Rogers Farm, they're building by right in the centerpiece, but there's two other little pieces of property between that development and McCaslin. Do we know, are they bringing a development plan? Or are there plans for that in that development?
Yeah, for the eastern portion of the property, there's a planned development application's been submitted.
Okay.
And that would be one of the development applications that the committee would need to review because there's connections to the trailhead that need to occur, as well as crossing across the creek. Urban drainage is going to require, as part of that development, that improvements happen for that section of the creek from McCaslin west to 2nd Avenue. And there could be at least one ped crossing bridge and maybe a low water crossing as part of that. So you guys would need to give input on that. So right now there's an application in the process, just started.
Okay, for the eastern portion that isn't being built currently. Okay.
From a timing perspective, I'm assuming that'll take a little while since it was just submitted.
Yeah.
So there should be plenty of time to have the meeting with RC Superior first.
Yes.
So SAC and ProStack will have a good idea of what the trails could look like on that side of the road to then connect over and across to build the full picture once an application comes forward.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, how it works with the trailhead, that we're going to be building, how those connect, how people get across the creek on this side. And then on that side, as part of that project and the parks projects, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 pedestrian bridges, I believe, and then 1 or 2 low water crossings as well on the east side of the creek as well.
Is there, I don't know this is a fairly broad topic, but with all that, or is there any more update on when Parks 1 and 2 might start to be constructed? I know it's been something you all have wanted to advance, right, faster than the developer wants to, but is there any update on that?
Depending on how things go this year, the RC Superior has talked about issuing another set of bonds at the end of this year. Depending on how much that is, will tell us how quickly those parks can be built.
Okay.
We'll know we'll have more information by the end of the year.
Okay. Do you all have other questions or anything on all those pieces right over there?
The Coal Creek improvements are set to be done in 4 to 6 weeks, right?
Well, the creek alignment will be, we expect to be done in 4 to 6 weeks, depending on weather. And the concrete trail should follow that timeline pretty closely. And then you'll start to see landscaping start to be installed, trees and shrubs and creek habitat.
Okay.
Didn't somebody have a question about landscaping? What trees are going to be replanted?
I think so.
I don't remember the question specifically now.
But I remember the communication around the whole park was that it was all going to be, was it at least 1 for 1 on the trees that came out, or 2 for 1? It was going to be native shrubbery as opposed to what was some of the stuff that was in there before. At least that's my recollection, but does anybody?
Patrick?
Yeah, and I know I think we have this as an agenda item on Wednesday.
Yeah, we do.
But Yeah, so for the creek, we'll end up having about 200 trees of 8 different native species. That'll replace the crack willow that was down in the creek bed. Will range from 2 to 8 foot tall. We'll have 850 shrubs, again, native species, and then we're doing 6,000 wetland plugs, which you'll see down in the creek. And then we've got 4 drop structures that are going in, and then we'll reseed and stabilize all the banks. But I actually have a small presentation I was going to show you guys on Wednesday with a little bit greater detail.
Cool. Hey Patrick, just to clarify, so the giant trees that were back out there, we're not planning on replacing those. It's just going to be trees that are 2 to 8 feet tall?
Yeah, we won't. I mean, we could always opt in to add taller tree species if we wanted to. But yeah, the plan for the cottonwood is still sitting up there. Will actually become part of the play feature for the environmental plan part too.
Okay.
If I could just mention that, like when the drainage planning happens farther west from there, if it could be a priority to maintain large old trees. The raptor monitoring program that OSAC has started over the last year has clearly seen that these large trees are critical for perching and nesting for our few remaining raptor species. So just a plug.
Yeah, there's actually a bald eagle nest that's set up over just off of Cherryvale. If people go down Cherryvale to, what is it, Baseline, on the left there, you got the reservoir on the right-hand side and then a whole bunch of trees in the creek on the left. There was an active bald eagle nest, and there's trees now, big old trees. So yeah, that's a good case in point right there for having something large.
Yeah, it's the big old trees that are critical.
Okay, all good. Well, then the last one is about, the committee input on development. We touched on this, so I don't know, do you all have questions around this? It seems, I guess where sometimes this can be challenging is if things move quickly and based on our meeting schedules, if we actually don't have a meeting schedule, that we sometimes have logistics problems figuring that out. As Trustee Hammerly mentioned to us, though, we always have the right to call another meeting if we so felt so to provide timely input. So I think that actually was, now after you said it, it's obvious, but it was actually a really good thing to realize that we can do that. But do you all have questions around this that you'd like to discuss?
Are there any developments that you guys haven't seen that you wanted to see applications recently?
I think, we provided input on Anderson. That worked out. I think we had a chance to do it maybe even twice. So I thought that was good. No, I wouldn't say we feel that we haven't, but we just want to make sure we get the chance, that's all.
Yeah.
Is really...
Along those lines, how do we find out when a development application has come in so that it's something we can start to think about or, try to get on an agenda before we see it pop up on a town board agenda?
Our staff liaison can do that for you at your meetings, provide you an update on applications that have been received.
So I think the two that jump out, obviously Zaharias, and then I think the Toll Brothers application, given that it's, adjacent to Tract H, the buffer zone, it's got the trail there, and then there's the issue of how it's going to connect with Anderson, whether there's going to be bike access from, the northern part of Rock Creek up through Anderson and then into Town Center. I think that that's something that I would definitely want to have OSAC weigh in on, and ProStac, both.
Rogers Farm, and then we're going to have to do Parks 1 and 2 again, aren't we? I know we have approved FTPs, but...
For which ones?
Parks 1 and 2?
Not unless there's changes.
Okay.
we had a chance to weigh in on Parks One, too.
Yeah.
We provided, I remember that vividly. No, I mean, obviously, Zaharias is, with our desire to protect the reservoir, obviously, we're ahead of that, though, from what you've seen that we put together, so. Somewhat related to that, and this isn't specifically on our agenda, and I don't know if this is against protocol, but I'm going to ask anyway, and you can tell me that it's not appropriate. No, this won't. But we know that the Ridge property is on the agenda tonight. Let's say, so, and we're actively ranking the properties. Like Town 15, is this something that if the town purchased would be zoned for, the infrastructure needs that the town had talked about? Is that something we should even be ranking as open space? I mean, once it's purchased, because it kind of falls into Town 15, right? It's town owned, but we said you'd be open to it being open space. Should we continue to rank that, or if it's purchased, should we just say, okay, the town owns it, it's for these other stated town purposes, and it just would be one less that we would rank?
Well, no, to continue that on, actually, the reason I was about ready to ask the same question, but take that maybe one step farther, is because the prior PUD that was put out apparently had a pre-approved trail system going along McCaslin as well as up along, I guess, the fence line and out toward the open space, although I don't know how it would get between the Ridge townhomes and the fence in between. But if that was pre-approved and we ranked it, it might change our rankings, because if we could get a trail out to the Boca open space through between the fence and the townhomes, that would actually, in essence, create 2 loop trails. So basically it would go out, you'd go south or north, and I've had people come up to me and ask, why don't we have loop trails in town? And that would create 2 loops by going right through the middle there. So I wouldn't want to remove it. I would want, it would change how we might rank it as a result, because I didn't realize that was something that was in the plans before.
But I would almost say that that would be a trail ranking process, not an open space purchase process.
Yeah, so well, I don't know. So I guess that is the question. Would we be allowed to, in essence, put trails through there, though?
And my guess is we'd have, Boulder, I thought, was very specific about saying when we added Shanshan, they weren't going to allow us to have any more connectivity through there. That's my recollection. Now,
but they also
we'll have to ask them.
We also had a discussion about, they had previously thought we were going to put a trail through there back when we talked with them a couple of years ago.
And Patrick's recently had discussions with the county about this, I think. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, when we did get the trailhead approved, and Mark, to your point earlier, we did have to agree to get rid of the 3rd Avenue trailhead, which was part of the conditional approval. They, at the time, in that meeting, were not interested in additional trail connection points into the open space. When we did the 2016 expedited trails process, we did have a trail identified along McCaslin, but at that time it was pretty cost prohibitive and it wasn't prioritized by the board. But we do have some information on that McCaslin trail that we have to bring back forward to the committee for review.
So, Sean, your question is, though, because it was identified previously, does that change any of this? And I guess we would have to ask the board to have staff to reach back out to Boulder County to find out.
Yes.
So Matt, can you speak to that at all? What was pre-approved in the?
Unless it was part of the plan development that was approved at the time, I don't recall any pre-approval of trail connections with the county or the town.
Sean, was this in the what
It's in the PUD, the 2007 PUD. It's a picture. It shows trails going up down McCaslin toward Bridge Townhomes, where we were proposing putting a trail along McCaslin, as well as west, right straight out between the townhomes and the reservoir fence.
And that PD has expired since it was approved. And no FDP was approved at the time, which would have finalized any trail connections or plans, so.
So maybe it makes sense to see what happens tonight, what conversation takes place, and maybe that'll help steer your path forward.
Well, that's, I mean, actually knowing that that PUD is expired, I think gives us some more clarity. And we can always add it as a trail in our ranking, and Boulder County can say no. I mean, every year we provide trails we'd like to see built to Boulder County. We could add that and get their response as a feeler for that. But if the town owned the property, then we could obviously ask for a trail to be put on there if we felt, and Boulder County felt it was appropriate, it seems, so. Okay. Man, we got through all 6. I don't know.
You ran a good meeting.
Well, I don't know about
Well,
that. Maybe
we were
talk too
expecting
much.
CenturyLink to be a little more lengthy until
Yeah.
things have happened of late, so that's why, I think.
So that was a good thing to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Check.
I mean, we're done with agenda items, so if you all have anything else for us, or we can give you some time back.
Anything you're looking for from us, I guess, is the question, or things we could do better.
I can't think of anything you can do better. I appreciate all that you do put onto your plate and look at so comprehensively. I think it really adds a lot of value to the discussions that we end up having when we know that it's been vetted so thoroughly with, groups like yourselves, ProStack and others. Appreciate your service.
When is Trails Day?
What's that?
When is Trails Day?
June 2nd.
Second.
And who do we have lined up for?
It's going to be basically the
Educational-
same lineup.
Yeah.
It's going to be someone from HawkQuest. It's going to be the snake, Cameron the snake guy, coming back out.
Your favorite.
Which, I don't know if you saw recently, but he just got a big grant from Guys Who Give. And his response from it was just, it was awesome. If you, I don't know, we can send you his blog, but it was really, I don't know, it was pretty moving to read how he was writing, how this validated him. And anyway, great guy. Glad he'll be out. We're going to do the wagon ride again. So that'll be going. So it'll be a very
It's
similar.
going to be a bike ride.
And yeah, Joel hopefully will be leading, but we'll be doing the bike ride again.
The Audubon Society might be there too.
Okay.
Trail run?
I don't know if we have that, but we should put that on there.
Maybe there's someone who's willing to lead it, right?
I'm willing to leave it.
What about a cleanup event? Are we doing that again?
That'll come more towards National Day of Service in the fall.
Okay.
So we will do that again, but we'll coordinate it through that. Again, that's usually September, I think, when that event comes around. So, yeah, and that seems to go okay. I mean, it'll be our 3rd year. It's gaining some momentum.
It's pretty good last year.
We're getting the logistics down of how we get the word out and get materials out to people, and that can somewhat be the challenge, but we're getting better.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are on.
Okay.
Welcome, and our work session continues with the advisory committee interviews. I'm going to start with your name, just a brief introduction. We'll go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks for meeting with me first. My name is Christina Costabile. I live in the Sagamore neighborhood, back behind Target. I have 2 boys, a 5-month-old and a 5-year-old. I'll go into my background because I guess it's a part of why I'm here. I want to be involved in the arts community here in Superior. I do have a lot of art background. I have an undergraduate degree in fine arts. I worked with a company called New Sky. I worked with them in Vienna and also California. They do multimedia guides and also a lot of digital installations. So some of the clients I worked with were SF MoMA and Perot Museum of Nature and Science. So I'm also still working part-time, but I'm no longer project managing for them, because I'm also home with my son, my youngest. Before that, I was working for John Fielder, photographer of Colorado, down in the Arts District down in Denver. So that was good experience, doing events there and First Fridays, and also putting up installations. I also have a lot of teaching experience, young kids in Philadelphia and Seattle, teaching art. So I've just been in a lot of different art communities around the US and also Europe. And yeah, and I think I could bring some value and maybe some fresh perspective. And that's kind of what I was thinking.
Great. We really appreciate your interest in CAPS, and thank you for applying. We'll go around the board for questions.
Okay.
Questions?
Hello.
Hi.
So typically the most important part of an advisory committee is actually being there so you can contribute thoughts and ideas and everything. CAPS meets on the fourth Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock. Do you have any conflicts or problems making those meetings?
No, that wouldn't be a problem. The only thing, I will be gone for the month of June, back in Europe actually, so it's the only.
Excellent. That missing a meeting here or there isn't a big deal.
Okay.
It's just when there's habitual absences, it becomes harder to make quorum and whatnot.
Right.
You said once a month or twice?
It's twice.
I just said once a month because that's officially what it is, but
Oh, is it? Okay.
So they also have a second meeting, and now I'm forgetting, first and third weeks or second and fourth? Second and fourth weeks. So the second week it's 6:30 p.m. and the fourth
Okay.
week is 6.
That's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
evenings are good.
Okay, awesome. So you've explained a lot of your background, which sounds like it'll be a fantastic addition to CAPS, as they don't have someone with kind of that gallery mounting experience. Have you been able to attend any CAPS meetings or watch any of the meetings online?
I watched some of the meetings online. Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't physically attended any, but I've watched quite a few of the videos.
The online channel makes that nice.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Excellent.
Okay. Other questions?
Do you have any ideas as to like what you'd like to see, brought to town from a cultural arts perspective? What are we lacking? What would you like to contribute to the town?
Well, I like a lot of the stuff that's already going on and that you've done, and the sidewalk, like paint, just small things like that make a big difference, I think. Something maybe I think is interesting that I've seen in a smaller town outside of Vienna, which was kind of cool, is I guess it was considered a pop-up installation, but it's called a Glockenweg, so like a bell trail. And on this trail they had different installations with cowbells on it because of the farming there and everything. And they had one with like 2 swings on it and like the cowbells in the center. And it's just really fun with kids because they'll want to go to the next one. Then they had another one with swings and just like a little bell. But it was fun because it was also quite interactive, and also gets people out to like want to stay in that space a little bit and kind of visit it. So things like that, I guess, that I've seen in different places that are both like a functional creative space where like people can kind of experience something. And I think there are places like that in Superior, I think, but maybe on a trail or something, it would be neat to see.
That sounds great. And, I guess my advice to you as a CAPS member would be to not hesitate and to be creative. It's really easy for a planned community like Superior to be nondescript and kind of vanilla. And I think that one of the things that CAPS brings to this community is an edginess, a funkiness, their willingness to take risks and do things that are unorthodox, out of the ordinary. And that can really help to kind of define like who we are as a town. So don't hold back. Any good idea is an idea worth considering, and I wish you luck.
Nice.
And thanks for volunteering.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mark took everything I was going to say. I lived in Philadelphia, I lived in Seattle.
Nice.
Neither of them can be defined by a specific art type. Whether it's to troll under the bridge in Seattle or, Philly had everything. what I was going to say is just when you think about Superior, don't hold back. Just be bold. I don't think we have to hew to anything specific, and I think art always evolves. So what is interesting today may not be interesting 5 years from now. So, by all means, just enjoy.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And my only question is, do you consider yourself more of a make it happen person or a think about it happening type? Are you a vision person or are you more of a hands-on person who likes to get down and get dirty and make it get done?
It's a good question. I kind of like both. With the project management, I enjoyed being a part of the concept phase and the planning. But when it comes to executing, I do really, there is something I do enjoy about physically hanging work or seeing getting a group of artists together and seeing a show come together. So I think I enjoy both of them, but I do also like the physical part, but I've been a big part of the conceptual planning, and then execution, at least with the company I previously worked for, was mostly the developers would do that. So it's been actually for the last 10 years, I guess, what I've been doing. But I enjoy both. Hopefully that answered.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Christina, thanks again for your interest in CAPS and your willingness to volunteer for the town. We really appreciate it. So we'll be acting on this appointment shortly.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I have one final question. The final question that I have to ask everyone is about conflict of interest. And the question is, do you have any potential for conflict of interest, like you own some art company that might benefit in some way from you being a member of CAPS?
No, I don't. Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, we'll adjourn the work session and be back at 7 o'clock.